According to some experts, 30 to 50 serial killers may be prowling the United States at any one time. Jeff Mailhot, one of the few to make Rhode Island his stalking ground, is nowhere near the top of the body count list. But he dispatched 3 women with his chokehold. Perhaps a dozen more narrowly escaped. You see, Mailhot displayed a predator's psyche. He killed not for money or vengeance, but for the thrill of it. He snuffed out lives with his hands, never a knife or a gun, to savor every moment of his victims' suffering and fear. He preyed on a specific group, prostitutes, whom he'd come to regard as less than human. And he concealed his horrifying depravity with an unremarkable everyday routine. He could dismember a body, toss the parts in a dumpster, and stop for a Budweiser on his way home. From time to time, as far back as the early 1990s, Woonsocket police had speculated that a serial killer could be preying on the city's prostitutes, who seemed to disappear with the grim sort of clockwork. In the summer of 2004, with 3 women gone in 17 months, the notion was once again making the rounds. Police had no clues, no suspects. The women just kind of vanished. Their break came in mid July with a tipster's call to police headquarters. The tipster suggested detectives contact Jocelyn Martel, a local woman with an arrest record for drug offenses and prostitution. They found her at a detention center awaiting trial. Martel told of a harrowing encounter with a man who offered cash for sex and then attacked her inside his apartment. Her description of the building and its location matched 221 Cato Street. This was the home of Jeff Mailhot. The detectives got Mailhot's name from utility bills and his picture from the DMV. They showed her a photo spread and she picked him out as her assailant. In the days that followed, cops tracked down several more women who described similar assaults. One joined Martel in signing a complaint. That was enough to get an arrest warrant. But their first encounter with Mailhot knocked Officer Lee and Officer Nowak off balance. You see, Mailhot seemed more normal than multiple murderer. He was polite, friendly, soft-spoken. His police record was clean. His landlord called him the ideal tenant, a guy with a steady job who always had the rent check. Then Mailhot buried his brush-cut head in his hands, and he began to talk. "I just want to be totally honest," he said. "I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want this shit inside of me anymore. I want to do what I have to do to help the situation any way I can, and I want that to be my last act. I'm not expecting forgiveness." As the minutes ticked by, in the spare interrogation room, Mailhot recounted his adventures in Woonsocket's night town. Over the years, he said, he'd picked up perhaps 30 prostitutes. Most took place at his apartment, where privacy was guaranteed. He could not recall exactly how many women he'd throttled, but he guessed 10 or 12 had survived an escape. Mailhot's words picked up speed as he recalled the attacks. At one point, he rose to his feet to demonstrate his squeeze technique. He held his left arm in front of his chest, as if grasping a victim and gripping his wrist with his right hand. "I lean back," he said, "so it puts more pressure on their neck." With minimal prodding, he provided details on several chokings. On 2 occasions, his victims fell to the floor unconscious. Both were back up in minutes, and neither wasted time getting out of the door. Another, who got away, stood outside shouting that she had a cell phone and she'll dial 911. The cops never showed, however. One woman convinced him to back off by playing the submissive slave. He recalled, she's standing in the bedroom saying, "Please, master, please let me go." And then things finally spun out of control the night he picked up Audrey Harris. He was driving home after too much beer from a strip club when he spied her on a sidewalk. He pulled up beside her and suggested a quick trip to his place. She agreed. "I was gonna have sex with her, just straight sex," he told the detectives. She got undressed. I got undressed. I went to get her money. She turned around, and that's when I went up behind her and started choking. She was kicking, scratching, trying to get away. As she was losing her breath, she stopped struggling. Then I let her go. I looked at her. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't looking at anything. I figured she was dying. That's when I got the pillow. I suffocated her. It's at this point Officer Lee asked him, "So it was not accidental?" To which he said, "I didn't want to do it, but once I realized what was happening, I was scared to death. I had to finish it." By his own account, his actions left him stunned for several minutes. Then he shook off his disbelief, dragged the body to the bathroom, and stumbled to his bed for a night of drunken slumber. The next morning, he wandered to the toilet and was startled to see a corpse in the tub. The previous night's events rushed back into his head. He called his employer to ask for the day off. That evening, he wrapped the body in a cheap rug and loaded it into his SUV. He drove about the city, searching for a place to dump his cargo, and then returned home, convinced it was too risky. For 2 days, the body lay in his apartment while he pondered how to make it go away. Then, like an episode from The Sopranos, he used a newly purchased handsaw to dismember it in the bathtub. An aerosol spray helped mask the smell, and a few drinks steadied his nerves. The parts went into trash bags, and the bags into various commercial dumpsters. He made the drop-offs under cover of night, but early enough to allow him another stop at the strip club before bedtime. Then Jeffrey Mailhot picked up Christine Dumont some 14 months later, and Stacy Galoo 2 months after that. Both women died in his apartment. Again, the bodies were dismembered and disposed in trash containers. For nearly 6 hours, the two detectives listened while a butcher described his deeds. Since that night, they've looked back on the episode many times, and not surprisingly, they have their own ideas as to why Mailhot killed. They said for him it was all a fantasy. He'd slip into his fantasy to escape his depressive world. And once he's taken that final step, once he kills, he's like an alcoholic. He's had a taste, he's addicted, and there's nothing that's gonna stop him. Throughout his confession, Mailhot himself tried to explain his motives. He dismissed his victims with contempt and disgust. "Maybe I was doing them a favor," he said, "because they were just killing themselves anyway. They were just going down the toilet." He described his existence as purposeless, his world as dark and ugly. He said, "It's stupid for me to be saying this, but with all the killings and the bad and all the drugs, the world is someplace I don't want to be. I know I'm not doing anything special with my life. I mean, I'd like to have $1 million and do all kinds of things, but I don't have the motivation." The police officers then asked if he'd kill again, and he said, "I probably would." Now, even before Jeffrey gave his account of what happened, the police officers were searching his apartment in Cato Street. At first glance, they saw a typical bachelor pad, 3 small rooms furnished with mismatched hand-me-downs and the latest electronic gadgetry. Before long, though, they uncovered signs of the slaughter as they darkened the bathroom and then sprayed the tub, floor, and walls with an aerosol can of luminol. the bathroom light went off and the investigators gasped. The porous grout lines between the tiles became a luminescent grid, revealing the gore Mailhot had tried to scrub away. Out came the tub, out came the toilet, then floorboards, pipes, and sections of tiled wall. The officers then reviewed tapes from a surveillance camera at a local hardware store and discovered footage of the suspect buying the tool just a day after the last victim's disappearance. From there, the search moved to the street. Mailhot had told Lee and Nowak he'd disposed of a latex glove and some small body pieces by flushing them down the toilet. With that in mind, investigators launched a probe of the sewer line outside his building. They first explored the pipe using a small video camera attached to long cable. What they found was an infestation of tiny worms, apparently attracted by high protein material coming down the drain. A public works crew then dug up several feet of the sewer line. For all that effort, the pipe proved to be a dead end. The lab team determined Mailhot's diet had provided a feast for the worms. He'd been sucking down protein shakes to help him bulk up at the gym. By the end of their investigation, police had gathered more than 170 items of evidence. Not one piece was ever presented in court, however, as the defendant, Mailhot, decided to forego a trial. You see, in Providence, Rhode Island, Superior Court, a teary-eyed Mailhot pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder and 2 counts of assault. The judge sentenced him to 2 life terms, plus 10 years. He made no plea for mercy. He said, "Nothing I can do can take away the pain. I hope God can give the families, both the victims and my own, some peace." He now resides at the Rhode Island Maximum Security. He will be eligible for parole in 2047 when he is 77.